In Bangladesh, a powerful river erased an entire city. Welcome to not abandoned, not destroyed by an army. The land itself was slowly taken away by the Meghna. This is Noakhali, a place where rivers erase the past, create new land, and force people to begin again.
Today, Noakhali begins here in Nijhum Dwip, a city that replaced the headquarters the river swallowed. Life here must constantly adapt and rebuild.
But the story of Noakhali begins much earlier, when this region was known by another name, Bhulua. Bhulua grew within a young delta, where rivers constantly reshaped the boundary between land and water. Centuries ago, destructive flooding became a constant threat, so the people dug a major canal to redirect the water. To control the ancient floods, a massive canal was dug. This new waterway became known as Noakhali, and it gave this living delta its eternal name. Over time, that simple name became attached to an entire region, Noakhali. And here is the secret to understanding Noakhali. Almost everything here begins with water. Every current carries sediment. Every tide moves it. Slowly, the delta builds and destroys. Here, losing land and gaining land can happen within the same story. Administrative boundaries changed too, as the greater Noakhali region was eventually divided into separate districts. But maps cannot fully explain Noakhali. To understand it, you have to meet the people living beside the water. For generations, families here have learned to read the river almost like a calendar. They know when the water rises, when the fish move, and when the river becomes dangerous.
Markets connect the coast to villages, carrying fish, rice, vegetables, stories, and news.
And food here reflects the same geography: freshwater, farmland, coastline, and generations of local tradition.
Then the mainland begins to disappear, and another side of Noakhali emerges, the islands. Hatia sits inside the Meghna estuary, surrounded by channels. They constantly remind you how powerful water can be.
Island life is beautiful, but it also demands constant adaptation. People build, repair, move, and rebuild, because the coastline never completely stands still. Farther south lies Nijhum Dwip, a landscape that feels less like an old island and more like a place still being born. New sediment becomes mud. Mud becomes ground. And eventually, life takes root. Birds arrive. Grass spreads. Trees take hold. An empty piece of delta becomes an ecosystem. Standing here, it becomes difficult to imagine that this land is part of a constantly moving world. But Noakhali's story is not only about nature. Some of its deepest scars came from people. In 1946, communal violence devastated parts of Noakhali. The human cost was enormous, leaving fear, displacement, grief, and memories that lasted for generations. Then an elderly man arrived on foot, choosing a difficult journey instead of watching from a distance. Mahatma Gandhi came to Noakhali seeking reconciliation, peace, and a way forward. Today, the Gandhi Ashram at Jayag preserves the memory
of that search for peace. History survives here not only in buildings, but in photographs, documents, stories, and memory. These fragments tell of a city lost to the river, and every generation inherits the responsibility of remembering what happened before them. 5 decades later, Noakhali entered another defining chapter, the Liberation War of 1971. Across the region, ordinary people became part of an extraordinary struggle for independence. Many never returned home, and their sacrifice remains part of Noakhali's modern identity. By December 1971, Bangladesh was becoming a new country, and Noakhali was part of that transformation. Today, the old stories live beside a rapidly changing modern district. This is the city Bangladesh lost to a river. Islands are born as the delta shifts. Memories of ancient Bulua still survive. Modern offices and schools create a new Noakhali. But just beyond the city, the old force remains. The Meghna still moves with a power large enough to redraw the landscape. Sometimes the change happens slowly. Sometimes a single season can transform a family's future. For people here, geography is not something they study. It is something they live, rewritten by the water. Noakhali is a living delta. This is the city Bangladesh lost to a river, and yet, every morning, boats leave again. Because resilience in Noakhali is not a slogan, it is a daily routine. Children grow up learning something outsiders often miss. Land here is never completely permanent. That instability has also created something remarkable, one of Bangladesh's most dynamic coastal landscapes. Here, destruction and creation are happening at almost the same time. It is a place constantly being rewritten by water, memory, and people. Every new patch of land can become a nursery for plants, birds, fish, and future communities. And that is why Noakhali feels less like a finished place and more like a living process. On a map, Noakhali looks like one small piece of Bangladesh, but its true borders are continuously rewritten by dynamic waters. But from the sky, you can see something very different. A landscape constantly being rewritten by water. The city that vanished, the islands that emerged, and the people who stayed are all part of one story. A story about survival, memory, movement, and the stubborn human need to call somewhere home. Perhaps that is the real secret of Noakhali. Every tide carries away a little history and brings a little future with it.